I paid for that wedding twice. Once with money, once with silence I didn't know I was keeping. My mother spent 11 years saving coffee cans full of ones and fives for a wedding she never got to see. And 2 days after it happened, a man I'd never met called my cell phone and told me not to bring my wife. Welcome back to Dad's Pure Revenge. If you're new here, drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from tonight. I read every one of them. If this is the kind of story that hits close to home, hit like before we start, and stick around, because this one earns it. My mother's name was Eleanor Cardwell, and she never had much, but she never let a birthday pass without a card and a $5 bill folded inside it, even when $5 mattered to her. She cleaned houses on Wilmington Island for 31 years. She kept 3 coffee cans in the bottom of her hallway closet, Folgers cans, the old red ones, and every one of them had a piece of masking tape on the lid, with a name written in her handwriting. One said Tyler. That was my son. She started that can the week he was born, and for 11 years, whenever she had a little extra, a 10 here, a 20 there, it went in that can. She used to tell me, a man remembers who showed up for him, Dennis. I intend to show up. She died 3 years ago, in April, at St. Bartholomew's Hospital, and the last thing she asked me was whether Tyler had found a girl yet. He hadn't. Not then. My name's Dennis Cardwell. I'm 56 years old. I own a hardware store on Bull Street in Savannah, Georgia, the kind with wood floors that creak and a bell over the door, the kind my father ran before me. My honest flaw, the one I'll admit right up front, is that I trust family further than I trust anybody else on earth, even when the evidence says I shouldn't. I found that out the hard way this spring, and it cost me more than money. When my mother passed, she left 3 coffee cans, a little over $61,000 total once we added it up, split between me, my younger brother Roland, and my sister-in-law's kids. Tyler's can alone had almost $19,000 in it, all of it earmarked, in my mother's own words on a note taped inside the lid, for whatever wedding that boy has, whenever it comes. Because I was working 6 days a week at the store, and Roland had, in his words, more time and a business mind. We agreed he'd manage it, set it up in an account, let it draw a little interest, and release it when Tyler got engaged. I signed the paperwork without reading every line. That was my mistake, and I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. Tyler got engaged to a young woman named Ivy Lawson last October. Ivy's from Beaufort, South Carolina, works as a physical therapist, and the first time she came to Sunday dinner, she washed every dish without being asked and argued with me about high school football like she'd been doing it her whole life. My wife Renata cried in the kitchen that night, the good kind of crying. We loved her before Tyler even asked. The wedding was set for a Saturday in June, at a place called Ashgrove Hall, an old restored dairy barn about 20 minutes outside Savannah, with white oak beams and string lights across the rafters. Beautiful place. Expensive place. Here's the part I want you to remember, because it matters later. Thursday, May 28th, 6:40 in the evening. Ashgrove Hall called me directly. Final balance due, $11,200. Due by June 1st, or they'd release the date. I called Roland. He didn't answer. I called again the next morning. He picked up on the 4th ring, and I could hear a television in the background. Some kind of game show. I sent the wire 2 weeks ago, he said. Flat. Almost bored. They're saying they never got it, Roland. Then that's a bank problem. Not mine. A pause. Then, figure it out, Dennis. I've got a lot going on. That was it. He hung up before I could ask what a lot going on meant. My mother's own son, talking about my mother's own money like it was a chore he'd already checked off a list. Renata and I didn't tell Tyler. Not one word. We pulled $11,200 out of our own savings, the fund we'd been building for a new roof, and wired it to Ashgrove Hall ourselves that same afternoon. We decided our son's wedding day was not the day he'd learn his uncle couldn't be trusted with his grandmother's money. We'd deal with Roland after. If you've ever quietly covered for someone in your family to protect somebody else's happiness, tell me in the comments. I have a feeling I'm not the only dad who's done that. The wedding itself, I'll tell you honestly, was one of the best days of my life. Tyler cried during his vows. Ivy's grandmother, a tiny woman named Dot Lawson, danced with me to a Otis Redding song and told me I raised a good one. There was a gift table near the entrance with a small wooden lockbox on it, carved with the letters T and I, for cards and cash gifts, the kind you see at every wedding now. I remember a young bartender named Cortez who kept refilling Dot Lawson's sweet tea without being asked twice. No tip jar out, just doing it because it was the right thing to do. Small thing. I noticed it anyway. I also noticed, around 9:15 that night, Roland standing near the gift table a beat too long, looking at his phone, looking around the room, looking at the lockbox. I noticed it the way you notice a picture hanging slightly crooked. Enough to register, not enough to stop what you're doing and fix it. I told myself he was probably just waiting on Renata's sister to bring the cake knife over. I didn't walk over there. I didn't ask. I've replayed that 10 seconds more times than I can count since then. 2 days later, Monday, June 9th, 11:20 in the morning, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. Mr. Cardwell? This is Preston Whitlock, General Manager over at Ashgrove Hall. His voice had that careful, rehearsed quality of someone who's done this call before and hates it every time. We had a policy review after the weekend, and our security company flagged your event for a routine footage audit. Mostly for insurance, nothing unusual on our end. But I need you to come look at something. In person. Just you, if that's all right. Please don't mention it to your wife yet. Not until you've seen it yourself. I sat in my truck in the parking lot behind my own store for almost 20 minutes before I called him back to set a time. If this story's already got your stomach tight, that's exactly where I was. Let's keep going. Wednesday, June 11th, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Preston Whitlock's office smelled like coffee and printer toner. He turned a monitor toward me, without much preamble, and hit play. Black and white footage, time-stamped 9:14 p.m., the gift table in the corner of the frame. Roland, in the gray suit he wore that day, glancing left, glancing right, then lifting the lid of the lockbox. It wasn't locked. The caterer had misplaced the little padlock earlier that afternoon, and pulling out 3, maybe 4 envelopes. He tucked them inside his jacket. The whole thing took under 11 seconds. Then he closed the lid and walked off toward the bar, like nothing happened. We flag any incident involving guest property, Preston said. Quiet. Professional. I wanted you to see it before it went anywhere near a police report, in case it was a misunderstanding. Family. Sometimes people grab the wrong envelope by accident. It wasn't an accident. I knew it wasn't. The second I saw his eyes on that screen, he wasn't confused. He was checking who was watching. I didn't say much to Preston. I thanked him, I asked for a copy of the footage, and I drove straight to my accountant's office instead of home. Here's where the story I thought I was in changed into a different one entirely. My accountant, a woman named Charlene Boykin, who'd done our books for 18 years, pulled the wedding trust statements Roland had been sending us, the ones I'd been too busy to read closely for 3 years. Once she laid them side by side with the bank's actual records, which she requested directly, the difference was ugly. My mother's account hadn't earned modest interest like Roland reported. It had been drawn down. 4 withdrawals over 2.5 years, totaling just over $14,000. Each one just under the amount that would have triggered an automatic bank notification to the co-signers. Roland hadn't just skimmed cash off a lockbox at a wedding. He'd been quietly bleeding my mother's coffee can money for years, betting that grief and trust would keep the rest of us from ever checking. That night I sat at my kitchen table with the bank statements spread out, and I wasn't shaking with anger the way you'd expect. I felt something colder settle into my chest instead. The specific, clear-eyed calm of a man who has just stopped making excuses for somebody. I didn't want to yell at my brother. I wanted the truth sitting in front of him, with nowhere to hide. Renata found me there, past midnight. I told her everything. Ashgrove Hall, The 11,200 we'd quietly covered ourselves. The footage, the statements. She didn't cry. She just said, Eleanor would want it fixed. Not fought over. Fixed. I called Roland Wednesday night. He didn't answer. Thursday, 6 missed calls from me to him. By Friday it was 11. Saturday, 17. I wasn't chasing him to yell. I was giving him the chance to call me back first, before Charlene finished the formal accounting and before I sat down with the family attorney. He never took it. 19 missed calls by the time I finally drove to his house that Sunday evening, unannounced. He answered the door already talking. Whatever this is, Dennis, I don't have the energy. I have the footage, Roland. I kept my voice level. I didn't raise it once. And I have Charlene's numbers. 14,000 from Mom's account over 2.5 years. You want to tell me about that? Or do you want me to tell you? He went quiet, in a way I'd never seen from him. My brother is a man who always has an answer ready. Usually a smart one. Usually delivered like he's doing you a favor by explaining it. That evening on his own front porch, he had nothing. He looked past me toward the